Hello, Hollery Times viewers. Judy Shields here. Today, joining us is Roger Carp. He's the senior editor at Classic Toy Trains magazine, author, and a Lionel historian. We'll be talking about his new book entitled Lights, Camera, Lionel Trains, a photo history of an American icon. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I understand that it's the 125th anniversary of Lionel Trains. How do you feel about that? Wow.
It's quite an accomplishment for, I think you'd say, for any business to be around for 125 years, but I would say especially in the toy industry where children change so rapidly, their interests change, and yet for well over a century, 125 years, this small business this large business that began as a small one in New York City in 1900 with two people kept growing and growing, and now continues to reach enthusiasts of all ages, individuals as well as families, until I think you'd say Lionel is virtually synonymous with the miniature toy train.
Well, I put in a background there so it'd be on the whole time, the cover of your book. And sometimes it's hard to see, folks, but there it is, the actual thing that I have. And I'm so proud of this as it
Thank
stops
you.
here and got notes.
Isn't it a great photograph? I
Oh,
was, as soon as I saw that on Getty Archives, I knew it would have to be the front cover. Took a little bit of time. I figured out it was shot probably around 1951, maybe 52, based on the trains that are there. I would be absolutely thrilled if that little boy were able to contact me now. I'd love to know who he grew up to be and if there's still an interest in Lionel Trains, but just the hands, the smile. And Judy, that's really what inspired me to create this book, to start paying much more attention to the hundreds of photographs I'd collected over the 40 years I've worked for Classic Toy Trains magazine, and begin to look at body language, facial expressions, what looked like the interaction between a child, an adult, an ordinary person, or a celebrity. And there were lots of celebrities. That interaction in a photograph between the person and this toy. Because very quickly I realized these were much, much more than toys. There was just something about a relationship in the photographs between a person that with this train, with this electric train, that you didn't find when, say, they would be with a wagon or a pair of roller skates or a globe or a doll, any of the more obvious kinds of toys. There was something different about an electric toy train.
We were talking before that you were here in the Los Angeles area. Had you ever gone out to the Los Angeles County Fair in Pomona? Had you been out there?
Yes,
The
yes,
train, you were involved with the trains over there?
just to enjoy them, just to
Okay.
see and enjoy. Uh, some of your viewers will probably remember back in the 1950s and 60s on Channel 9, Engineer Bill, Cartoon Express. And that really was the start of a lifelong love affair with toy trains. And I was most fortunate. I think the first story that I did on my own for Classic Toy Trains in the early 90s was to meet Bill Stella, Engineer Bill. And he was as terrific and as warm a human being as he had been as a television host. I mean, it was just everything you would like it to be when you grow up and you meet a hero. And he truly was wonderful. And so I think it was really that just sparked the interest that's grown over the years, and just a fascination with how these trains were so popular. And again, your viewers may recall that for most of the post-World War II period, say 1940s, well into the late 60s, this was the number one toy for mostly boys, but there were girls who did enjoy electric trains. It was the most sophisticated toy, really, from about the time Lionel was established in 1900, again, well into the late 60s. So there really was a step forward. The child who got this, I think, like me in 1956, realized this is not just another toy. This is not something to be played with and not cared about. I really felt it was a step in my maturity as a child, as a person. And just talking to others over the years, I have found that to be the case. What also fascinated me wasn't true with me. It was my toy to play with whenever I wanted. But there are so many enthusiasts who will recall this was given to them to play with, but it was the families, which meant it came out at Thanksgiving. It was carefully arranged by or around the Christmas tree. And then in early January, it was packed away for the next 10 months. It was not out all year. And their parents or grandparents made it very clear this is the families. And then when I started to explore how much an electric train cost, because these were not inexpensive. In the late 40s, a Lionel or an American Flyer set, which included a locomotive, some cars to run with, freight cars, passenger cars, track, and a power source, it cost as much as, say, a large radio or even a washing machine. Yeah. And again, so all of a sudden it made sense to me that parents would say, no, it's the families. It isn't Junior's. Junior can play with it with his friends, but it's the families, which means it gets packed away and well taken care of.
Oh my gosh. Well, how long did it take you to put this book together and what was your research? Oh my goodness.
Okay, well, starting about the time I joined Classic Toy Trains, I became fascinated with photographs of the people who made the trains, meaning the engineers and the people on the assembly lines, as well as the executives. But then I began to find some photographs, say, from publicity stills from movies or newspaper shots that had a politician interacting with an electric toy train, families. And so little by little, I began to collect them. And then I learned about places like Getty Archives or the Everett Collection in New York, where they had great photographs. And so I had put them away, and then COVID hit. And instead of being able to go to an office every day to write, I was home. And there was a lot of time. So I thought, what happens if I take out some of the pictures? Can I write 400 words about different photographs in which I really explore what's happening and what's the significance? Because I went to graduate school in American history. So I've tried to look at the toy trains in a far bigger perspective, not just as a hobby, not just as a toy, but what do they say about society, American society? Why were these so popular? Why did parents and grandparents, who were the ones buying them, see these as contributing to the maturation, the growth of a little boy? And Lionel would do this in their advertising. They said, the boy of today who gets a train will grow up to become the productive, thrifty, hardworking man of tomorrow. And this was a way of promoting them. At the same time, they began to say to fathers, you need to get away from the stress of your job. You need to relax, and you very much need to interact with your son. We have the perfect way to do it. Men, you can become boyish again, not childish, but boyish. And that's a very positive thing. And boys, you can become like your dad. And so I began to explore the photographs. Did they indeed show this, what the advertising had? And they did. And so I began to write, and I showed my essays to some friends and said, here's the photograph. They said, this is really good. Why don't you keep going? Why don't you think if you can do 100 of these? And that I thought, that's a huge challenge. I don't think I can. But after about 3 or 4 years, I had 100. And then I kept going. And so I took 100 of them for this book. I've got about 50 or 60 more. And so my hope is in a few more years to do a second book like this. But it was really fun to do. And in some cases, to talk to the families of some celebrities. And I was very lucky. Glenn Ford, his son Peter is alive, and there were photographs of the two of them. So I spoke with Peter Ford, learned what it was like, how they interacted. He and his well-known father interacted with Trains, how they played together. Dodger fans will remember the great Roy Campanella. And when Roy Campanella was in, Dodgers were still in Brooklyn, there were photographs of him, of Roy Campanella with his family in Life magazine. Fascinating because it's probably the first time that American society saw an African American family playing with trains. That was important. I learned that the great singers Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra were also Lionel fans. And I was very fortunate to speak with Nat King Cole's widow many years ago. And she shared some family photographs of Nat playing trains with their late son, Kelly. The Sinatra family has been wonderful to work with. And just kept going on and on looking for people. And then the motion pictures. And your viewers will probably be fascinated to know the first motion picture that I believe used an electric toy train was 1923. So the electric train is pretty new then. It's not in a drama, it's in a comedy done by Buster Keaton called The Electric House. And what he did, and it's genius, he has a scene in which there are some big wigs, stuffed shirts at a banquet, and Buster is behind the scenes in the kitchen, and he has a toy train bring their food out to them from the kitchen on a track. Okay, you can guess the rest. The train speeds up faster and faster, and before long, the soup is flying all over the place, and all of these people who are in their tuxedos and dressed up are covered with food. It's great. It's been used later. That kind of gimmick. It's been used in later films, but that's the first one. And so but then later in the 1930s, there are a number of motion pictures in which, again, you take a rich man, an older man who everybody thinks is stuffy, has no sense of humor, can't relate to him, and somebody, a grandchild, a neighbor, brings out an electric train, and all of a sudden this old guy is on the floor playing with it, pushing the kid out of the way, running it. And it was, again, Hollywood used this to make people come to life. And so we had that well into the 40s, even into the 50s. There's some great motion pictures with toy trains in them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Going through this book, and I'm a huge I Love Lucy or Lucille Ball fan. And to see that page, I like dog-eared it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, you don't even realize it. You know, you see these episodes and you don't even realize that there's like a train in there. So now it's like, okay, now I got to go back and appreciate all of these movies and go rent them, you know, to see that in that perspective, because we miss stuff like that, right?
Yes. And at the holidays, I know Turner Classic Movies
Yes.
always plays Holiday Affair with Robert Mitchum and Janet Leigh. where a Lionel Train plays a major role. And very fortunately for me, Gordon Gebert, who plays the little boy, is
Oh,
still alive. And I had the opportunity to interview him about 10 years ago. He was just delightful. And I said, "Did you get to keep the train?" He said, "No." They
oh,
gave me a different one. And okay, I wonder, I figured, well, I guess the train was probably taken home by someone and lost. 2 years later, a collector, current collector who lives in the middle of the country said, "You remember that article you did about Holiday Affair?" "Yes." He said, "I've got the train. I got it years ago from someone who was on the production team of Holiday Affair who had taken it home, kept it, played with it with his son, and then eventually sold it. And he sent me pictures. It was indeed the same one."
that's
So
gonna be so fascinating for you, right?
it is.
Oh, I mean, the research is amazing.
The detective work is always so much fun and still going on because there are celebrities today that have made this their hobby. Two that your viewers probably know of. One, of course, is Neil Young, the Hall of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performer. He's been very big in Lionel Trains, had a wonderful collection, a layout, and actually became a part owner of Lionel in the late 80s into the 90s. Mandy Patinkin, Broadway star, television star, Tony Award winner. He's got a wonderful Lionel layout, and he's enjoyed Lionel Trains since growing up in Chicago in the 1950s. And then over in the scale model side of the hobby, which is different, there is Rod Stewart. And he is a phenomenal modeler. If his name were Rod Smith, he would still be recognized around the world as a great modeler. And so it's just been fun to learn this. Over the years, I've heard that, well, your viewers might remember The Fabelmans, that movie that came out about the fictionalized childhood of Steven Spielberg. And very much, this is indeed what that episode where the little boy goes with his family to see the greatest show on earth, the Cecil B. DeMille movie, in which there is a train wreck, and the little boy goes home and reenacts it with his Lionel Trains. In The Fabelmans, this is exactly what happened with Steven Spielberg in 1952 or 53. He did get a Lionel Train for the purpose of making a family film. And so, yeah, there's just all of this interest.
Now, of all the pictures that you've come across and researched, is there any celebrity or historical figure that has surprised you that had trains that you said never?
Oh, what a good question. Um, I would, wow.
A
I
stumper.
think I was really surprised about Glenn Ford that he had. I guess I just thought he was. It was just hard to imagine that he
Yes.
would. I know there's some pictures of Ezio Pinza, the great Metropolitan Opera star, who was the lead in South Pacific, and I found some photographs that he enjoyed Lionel Trains. Another one that was really fun to find out, and I did indeed interview her son, was the exotic dancer Gypsy Rose Lee. She had a great Lionel display in her apartment in
Oh,
New York City. So that was Jackie Gleason was a fan, and he had one built for him. Uh, and in fact, he on his early show before the Honeymooners, he had a show, and he decided his character. I think it was Reginald Van Gleason. That was sort of the rich playboy on the show. This is early, maybe 1952. He asked for and got a Lionel Train to go on the show. And instead of bringing out little logs or little barrels, the train brought out cigarettes as well as a shot glass. and he said on live TV across the nation, Lionel Trains go great with booze. And the executives at Lionel were horrified until their sales reps across the nation said, what a brilliant move. How did you do that? Sales are really increasing. So things like that. And that's interesting. I have tried over the years to reach out to Jackie Gleason's. I believe he has at least one daughter who's still alive. I'd love to know more about that. Never been successful in getting a reply.
Hey, maybe someone will watch this and reach out.
Well, I'm hoping because I've got another one that at some point I'd like to mention today.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Your viewers, like all of us, probably have enjoyed the 1950 science fiction classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. You may remember that the alien who comes down interacts, meets a little boy played by Billy Gray, who went on to Father Knows Best. And at one point, Billy Gray pulls out from under his bed on a piece of plywood a very simple loop of Lionel track and shows his train to the alien, who remarks, yes, where I come from, the trains run, but they don't need tracks. I have tried to reach Billy Gray to ask him about that. I'd love to talk with him about that. I'd also love to find a publishable still, if there is one, of that scene. I don't know whether the studio did one, but it's on so briefly,
Yeah.
but long enough that I can identify the train. But that would just be one.
So there you go. You have so many goals.
Oh, yes, yes. And then
Dreams.
there's another one. You're again the great 1951 movie called People Will Talk with Cary Grant.
Wow.
It's a very serious movie, except there's a scene where Cary Grant and one of the co-stars have a spread out all over the floor of their big apartment Lionel track, and they're running two trains. Inevitably, they collide. But again, a still of one of those scenes would be great for the next book.
Oh, you're gonna have to talk to Santa more often,
Yeah,
right?
yes. Yeah, so those are my wish lists.
You
But
know, that is something else. You know who amazed me when I was going through your book to see with trains? I mean, he's a sports hero, but it was Joe DiMaggio. I mean, that just kind of, I was like, that's so cool, that photo.
yes, thank you. And Joe DiMaggio had a very special relationship with the executives and the workers at Lionel. This was in the late 1930s when he was just emerging as a great baseball player. He had grown up without very much in the San Francisco area. So this was a goal of his to have a Lionel train, which he did. And we've got a photograph in there of him just dressed in a suit, but on the floor playing with it. But because his background was from Italy, and the workforce at the Lionel factory in northern New Jersey was predominantly Italian, he was a hero, an ethnic hero. And so Lionel invited him to come to that factory, and the workers, from the supervisors down to the most humble line worker, just crowded around him. And there was such great pride that someone that they had great respect for was not only a baseball star, but appreciated what they were building. So that was really, really important, Joe DiMaggio. I often wondered if his love affair with Lionel continued, because I haven't seen photographs, say in the 1950s, of him with trains, but I know at that time it was really, really important to him.
Another cool fact that I learned was I didn't realize how popular taking photos of trains were for marketing and advertising. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it was just this was something that Lionel went out of their way to do. They cultivated photographs. They wanted families. They invited families to come to their showroom in New York City to take photographs there, to send pictures from Christmas, from Hanukkah, and they wanted to see the interaction, the love between parents, grandparents, and little boys with their product. And there were just endless pictures. I don't know whether there were some pictures of boys frowning because they didn't get the exact set they wanted, probably some of those, but mostly there were, and a lot of the times it was funny, the pictures would show dad and an uncle crowding around the train, and you might see the little boy in the background. I've even seen some where the boy is frowning. Because
Yeah,
dad, when do I get a turn?
exactly.
And yeah, but yeah, they were just so popular, and the photographs. There were newsreels before movies that would show Lionel trains on displays, and of course the department stores throughout all the cities. I remember growing up in Los Angeles, the May Company had an enormous display in the big windows. The Broadway did,
Yeah.
and then
Oh,
Macy's in New York, Marshall
yes.
Field's in Chicago.
Oh man.
I've always been disappointed that there isn't one in Miracle on 34th Street.
Right.
Yeah, no toy trains in there. So that's too bad. That would be fun to do because it's such a great movie. But yeah, everywhere you went, it was just, and families would spend their evenings before Christmas strolling down boulevards, looking in the windows, window shopping, kids dreaming. And I've used some photographs in the book that show the crowds. And
Yeah,
again,
I
you
know.
just get a sense of what's going through the heads, especially in the Depression, where you're
Oh,
seeing a lot of women. And I've learned that women bought many of the trains, mothers, aunts, grandmothers. They were buying the trains. So again, they needed to be convinced this was a wholesome, beneficial product for the next generation to have. Women also appreciated the colors. And so Lionel went out of its way to be sure its trains were bright, vivid colors.
oh,
And you look during the Depression and you can see there's some smiles, but there's also sadness. There's also the sense of, I wish we could afford this, but we can't, not yet. And then I think that's why right after World War II, there was such a pent up demand for toy trains, both from families who had been without during the Depression, but also from the returning soldiers, flyers, sailors who had dreamed of a train and then had to wait and wait. And now maybe they had a baby girl, a baby boy as an excuse. Maybe they were just going to do it for themselves. But sales skyrocketed in 1946, 47, 48, 49, well into the 50s. The baby boomers, this was their toy.
yes, exactly. So when did your fascination of trains start?
Uh, I think with Engineer Bill, and then Hanukkah 1956, I got my first Lionel set
I
and have enjoyed it, passed it along to my two sons who are now in their 40s. And then I'm building something in my basement because we have basements here in Milwaukee
oh, you're in
for my
Milwaukee.
two grandsons who are 6 and 4.
Oh,
And I think they're going to enjoy it. They're going to help with it. But I have to acknowledge that this is no longer the most sophisticated toy that they can get. Probably by the time now that my older grandson is 6, soon to be 7, he's got much more sophisticated, exciting, elaborate things to play with. So I think they'll get a kick out of this, but not the way that I did. But that's okay. That
Yeah.
is okay.
I thought for sure your background would have a train, but I guess you have it in the basement. Darn it.
No, up here I just got some books and a couple of guitars.
Well, there, yeah, I noticed the guitar. I'm like, okay, well, guitar goes good with picking when you're with the train going around. You
It
can do a
does a
train
lot of
song,
great
right?
train songs. And of course, that brings to mind Johnny Cash,
Yes, right?
who was a big fan of all trains of all sizes. He did have toy trains and became a spokesperson for Lionel in the 1970s, which was a critical part of its history. The founding family, and there are lots of photographs of the founder and his son who took over in the 50s. There are photographs of them taken together in the 1940s and 50s. That family had sold out its interest. And then in the 1960s, Lionel went through some challenging times as the activities, the interests of boys and girls changed. Those boomers, as we know, I'm one of them, our interests turned from toy trains to sports, cars, uh, relationships, that kind of thing. And then we went away to college or got a job, whatever. So Lionel and ownership changed. And in the 1970s, General Mills, the cereal giant, acquired the rights to make and market Lionel Trains. So there were some challenging times for them. And they found in Johnny Cash the perfect spokesperson. And he was interacting with his young son with toy trains, he playing with them, but he did commercials. And there are posters. I'm hoping to include one of those images in the next book.
Oh, great.
Yeah, but that was, and he would sing about Lionel Trains. He'd sing about all trains. So that's another country performer was Merle Haggard.
Oh, yes. He was
And
also.
I spent many years finally reaching him,
Oh,
and we met, which was very exciting.
yeah.
And he said, yes, when I retire, I'll go back to my home around Mount Shasta. I'm going to
Hmm.
create something big. And we know, sadly,
Yes.
he died on the road.
Yeah. On his
But
birthday. I
yes,
mean,
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
I interviewed him 2 months before he passed. Can you believe
Wow.
that? And he was
Wow.
amazing. Yeah,
Yes, he was.
it
Yes.
broke my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but
Cool.
I'm just thinking there are new celebrities are going to find toy trains as
Yeah.
new families are. And what Lionel is making now is so exciting. They are scale replicas that they have realistic talk. You can hear what the engineer and the crew would be saying to themselves. You've got lights all over, you've got steam, you've got smoke. They really can do so much. And I can't think of any kind of locomotive from, say, the late 19th century to the present that hasn't been modeled by Lionel. And so it's an exciting time to be in the hobby.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for our viewers who may want to get into purchasing a Lionel train for their son, grandson, daughters, granddaughters?
What I recommend is take a look at what your child's abilities and interests are. For
Okay.
the very, very youngest, I recommend starting with Brio trains. Those are the beautifully made wood trains that you can push and pull along the track on the floor. It's a wonderful, perfect, great toy. Then you may want to explore Lego trains, which are battery powered, and they combine with Legos to build cities. And that's sort of a whole other niche of the hobby, because there are enthusiasts, Lego enthusiasts into their 20s and 30s that are still building with Legos and creating cities for their trains. But after Lego, then I would say by the time a child, boy or girl, is maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, they're ready for that first big electric train. Do it with supervision, play together, have fun with them. They're not inexpensive, but they never were. when you factor in inflation, and as I mentioned earlier, about the cost compared with an appliance in the 40s, these were never cheap, inexpensive items. They were well made, and they have remained well made, both made here in America and overseas. But they are they're an investment. But as Lionel always said, they're an investment in happiness, in bringing a family together, tightening bonds between parents and youngsters. And isn't that so important? That to me is a timeless pursuit. And I think families today are always looking for ways to tighten their bonds, to express their love, to do things together, and to bring out the very, very best, the imagination, the artistry, the knowledge in youngsters. This is a hobby that does it. This is a hobby that can teach you woodworking, electricity, uh, artistry, building scenery. It's all there. It really is a great way to have fun together.
Thank you. Well, let us know your social media and how folks can get a copy of your book as well.
All right, thank you. My book is called Lights, Camera, Lionel Trains. It is available at Project Roar, which is the publisher, projectroar.com. It's available on Amazon. My name, you can see it's Roger, and the last name is Carp, like the fish. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I can be emailed at Roger_Carp@att.net. Anyone who has a photograph of themselves from the past with a toy train, love to see those. They're welcome to send those. Maybe they've got a story of getting that first toy train. Love to hear those. So by all means, I'd be thrilled if people want to reach out, and especially if I can get a hold of Billy Gray. I'd love to find out more there. But it just never gets old. And that's what I have to say. And I hope that my love of this hobby and of the trains and the photographs comes out in this book.
So are you currently working on the next part two?
Yes, I am. Yes, gathering photographs,
Okay.
putting together stories. Again, people. So many people have helped over the years, Judy. I'm very fortunate, and that really includes. I was lucky in the early 1990s. I would take a trip to New York and New Jersey every year, and I would find and interview the former employees. They were elderly. They were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s back then. But it was just so much fun to get the inside story, to really come to understand what this company was about. They emphasized to me we were a very modern, well organized, brilliant company. Our engineers were as good as those at RCA or Westinghouse. Don't forget, besides making toy trains, we were making precision instruments for the US military from the 1930s into the 60s. That's how good we were. Don't ever discount what we were making. Our trains would last forever, and they have. And so it was just so much fun. And they would share personal photographs, pictures behind the scenes, Christmas parties, weddings, picnics. Executives would show themselves on the road. One of my favorite photographs in the book, there is one that was taken right before the American Toy Fair in New York in 1948 of all the salespeople. The original was given to me by one of the men in that photograph. He was young at that time. He was elderly when I met him. He said, "I'd like you to have this original because you really seem to care about all of us at Lionel, even though it's decades later." The photograph is in there, and I have this odd feeling I'm the last human being that knows who everyone in that photograph is. And I can tell you, about each of those individuals. I can tell you stories about each of them. I can tell you why they're seated or standing where they are. It's an interesting, odd kind of feeling, but I'm very proud that I can carry on this history.
And that's where your title historian comes from, right?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah. So
I love that. I'm like, he's an historian. What makes you one? You just answered that question right there.
thank you. Yeah, it's really, really just it really is such an important part of our history. And we don't think of toys that way. We think, but they say so much about who we want our children to be, how we want them to play, what kind of men and women we want them to grow up to become, especially at this time when it was the grown-ups who were making the purchases. And as many of us know, you got toys only twice a year, for your birthday and at the holidays. So it was very, very special. You took your time making your choices. Lionel put out a catalog. They printed more than 1 million copies, came out right after Labor Day every year, beautifully color illustrated. And these were wish books. They were given away free. And I can remember just you'd pour through them, you'd dream. Oh, I'd like this. No, wait a minute. No, I want that one. What about this? I can't keep asking for that much. And then finally, you would ask your parents, do you think I could get this or that? And well, I don't know. I know you've tried to be good this year, but you're asking for a lot. And then maybe that amazing day came. Maybe you went with them to pick it out, or more likely, that first night of Hanukkah, Christmas morning, there's a big box, and you would rip off the wrapping paper, and dreams came true. It just a wonderful part of an America that I hope is still there, but I know so many of us remember it as a different time.
My grandson is 6, and
Ah,
yeah, so it's like I want to. Of course, he's got I was going to ask you about. Is it called gauge? Is that the size? There's different ones,
yes.
right? What are those?
Okay. Gauge technically is the space between the outermost rails on a piece of track.
Okay.
But we in toy trains use it really to talk about the size of the trains.
Okay.
And so I'll give you a brief. Toy trains as an industry began in Germany in the late 19th century,
Wow.
well before plastics, well before the careful die casting of metal. And so they were very toy-like. They were big because that's the best that technology could do. And so the Germans came up with, there was track that would be big enough that was almost 3 inches wide. And they called that number 3 gauge.
Okay.
Next down was number 2 gauge, which was 2 inches. And then you eventually had number 1 gauge, which was smaller yet.
Okay.
In America, you had number 2 gauge in the 1890s. Then Lionel came around in 1900. It started with almost 3 inches of gauge, wide, big trains. And then it came up in 1906 with something not as wide, but they daringly called standard gauge, as though this is the standard and the rest of you better try to imitate it. Some other manufacturers did not like that idea, so they made their track the same width, but they called it wide gauge.
Okay.
And then at the same time, manufacturers realized we should try to come up with something a little bit smaller, not as expensive, because not everyone has a big house for their trains. So they called it, if you've had 3, 2, 1, the next smaller gauge would be 0.
Okay. 0.
But that was misread as the letter O.
Oh, I get it.
Which is why if you ask anybody who's knowledgeable about Lionel trains, they'll tell you, oh, that's O gauge. And
Okay.
that's what we call it. And then in time, even that got smaller. And we had what was called S gauge, which
Oh,
was about 2/3 the size. And if anyone remembers American Flyer trains, that was a different brand. And that's what Engineer Bill ran on Cartoon Express on Channel 9. And that was American Flyers were S gauge.
Yes. Okay.
And then even smaller are the ones that are used by scale modelers, HO,
HO.
which stands for half O,
Oh,
because it's about half the size of O gauge. And
okay.
that is the most popular
HO.
in
Okay.
America. And then technology has made it possible. HO is a proportion of about 1 to 87. Technology made possible something about half that size of a proportion of 1 to 160. And that's called N gauge.
Yeah, I've heard of the N. Wow.
And then even smaller to a
What?
scale of 1 to 220 is Z gauge. And that's the kind of thing you can fit inside a briefcase. You can have a little layout in a briefcase, a Z gauge layout, or inside a glass covered coffee table.
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize it was that small.
You need really good eyes and really great hand-eye coordination to go with N gauge or Z gauge. But
No kidding.
so I prefer O, which is good for my aging eyes and hands.
I have to say to all my listeners, this book, you've got to get this book, and it's going to be a great birthday present and a great Christmas gift, anniversary gift
Father's
for
Day,
everybody. Mother's Day, Father's Day is going to be coming up
yes.
as well. I mean, wouldn't this be a great book to give them with actual little, with a starter, like a little starter set for Pops, so that he has something to do. I'm going to tell you something, Roger. Santa Claus is going to send you this year, because of this book, is going to send you a thank you letter for all the trains you got
Oh.
to deliver, but the elves are going to send you a thank you letter. That's what's going to happen this year, 2025, for the holiday.
All right. Judy, thank you so much. This is wonderful, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
And we will have you back on when you get this second book, because this first
Thank
one
you.
is a slow page turner, let me tell you, because you read it and you study the book, or the pictures. I'm I've had this on the train. I ride the train to Los Angeles, and and it takes up half the table, but it's such a nice big one. And I'm looking at it, I read it, and I look at the picture. It's taking me forever to go through this book, and I love that about books. It's a great coffee book table, coffee table book, because it will always sit there.
Good. If I could just throw one more thing to tempt all
Sure.
your viewers, I've got two great pictures of Shirley Temple, the toy trains.
Oh,
That'll be in the next one. So we've
see?
got, yes, so there are more celebrities. I
Oh,
saved some good ones.
for the Hollywood folks out here. When can we expect that? Next
I,
year?
I'm
This
hoping
year?
2027.
2027. You're
Yeah,
gonna
still
make us
gathering
wait.
those pictures, but and writing, but having lots of fun.
Well, we appreciate that. And actually, this interview will go up on our YouTube channel, Hollywood Times Official. So we'll have that up for our viewers and for you to use if you like. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It
Thank
was a
you.
great honor meeting you, a historian, Lionel Train expert.
Thank you, Judy. Have a great day. And
And happy Easter to you this weekend.
thank you so much. The same to you and your viewers. Bye
Thank
bye
you.
now.